My name is Meirc. I'm a senior consultant at Meirc, and I am excited to share with you my experience on success and positivity that I have learned working with many employees and leaders from around the world in both the public and the private sector. Over the next 20 minutes, I will go over a number of slides, after which I will open the floor for your questions. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window located at the bottom of your screen as I go along. We will capture your input and try to answer as many of your questions as possible at the end. So let us test the chat screen and see if it works. Can you type in yes to the chat screen if you hear me clearly? Good, excellent. Getting a lot of yeses. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you find this webinar informative and interesting. Just a quick summary of my background. I started my education in engineering and transitioned over the years into strategy, where I worked in the financial sector with HSBC America. I also co-founded a startup called Correlation that developed data mining tools, and I worked in consulting with McKinsey. My assignments included projects such as education reform in Bahrain, economic investment policies in Saudi Arabia. And after working in the private sector, I spent 7 years working in the government of Dubai and Abu Dhabi on innovation, technology, and strategy, including working as an advisor in the executive office of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, where I was involved in the launch of various projects. Now, while working in all those different places, I became very interested in what makes people successful. And it's a topic that I am extremely passionate about, and I hope to share that passion with you in the next slides, talking about the power of positive attitude. So, what will we talk about today? So, our agenda will focus on the following things. First of all, I'll give a brief overview on what attitude is and how we define what is positivity. I will then talk about the typical reactions when faced with a crisis and how typically people react when faced with a difficult situation. Finally, I'll talk about happiness, success, and positivity. This will take us about 20 minutes. I will then go on to answer as many of your questions as possible. So let's begin. We'll start talking in general about attitude. So can you please type into your chat box, what is your definition of attitude? What do you think it is? Right, see 3 people are typing. So do you think it's a behavior? Do you think it is the way that people look at life? You think it's okay, so it's a positive, Maruf is saying it's a positive outlook towards life. Nasser is saying behavior towards others. Reactions, view of thinking, reactions, very, very good, excellent. So all those things, I agree with them completely. It's a tendency to feel and behave in a particular way towards certain things, person, or event. But it's also a state of mind, a mindset, and the way that you look at things mentally. But all of it is in the brain. So if I had to define attitude in one word, yes, reaction, choice, but I would define it as life. Now, why do you think it's defined as life? Because your attitude, whether it's positive or negative, really makes a huge difference in your life. Two people can look at the same things and they can behave differently. They can either behave in a positive way, or they can see it as a poison that cripples them and they can't do anything about it. So your attitude really dictates whether you're in the way or on the way. So whether you're living life or life is living you. So let me give you an example, and hopefully this will make it clearer. The example of two people looking at the exact same thing and having a different attitude or different mindset. So there's a story that there was a company that sold shoes around the world, and they wanted to expand into a new country that used to be part of the Soviet Union, and it opened up its borders and it wanted to trade with other countries. So this company sent two salespeople to do some research and estimate how many shoes can be sold. So the first salesman came back and he told his manager, we can't sell any shoes, 0 shoes. Why? Because nobody in the country wears shoes. They just wear sandals. They don't know about shoes. They don't want shoes. So there is no opportunity at all. Whereas the second salesman came back and he was very excited. He told his manager, nobody in this country wears shoes. Therefore, we have a great opportunity to sell to everyone. So it's the exact same thing, but people look at it in different ways. So attitude really at the end, it's a matter of choice. Now that doesn't mean that you pretend that you don't have problems. Life is like that. We all have problems that we go through, but there is a lot of research that shows that 80% of what we worry about is really not that important. Doesn't mean that there are not important things that we should worry about. Yes, there are things that happen, difficulties and crises, but that doesn't mean that you spend all of your time worrying about it. So let me show you how attitude is a matter of choice. Now, one of the hardest things that can happen to people are a disability. Not losing your sight or losing the use of your legs. Now, it's always quite uplifting and inspiring to see some people trying to overcome that. So take a look at this picture over here. Now, this is a person who has unfortunately lost the use of his legs, doesn't have those anymore. So what is he using? What is he sitting in? Can you type in what you see on that slide? So what does it look like? A bucket? Absolutely. He is sitting in a bucket. Now, how much does a bucket cost? Nothing, right? So even in a very poor country, there are lots of buckets around. And then what is he using as legs? Go ahead and type in if you can see. I know it's a little bit hard to make out what the legs are made of. Yeah, steel rod, but what type of steel rod? This is not something that's custom made. This is something that he found and he's using. Metal sticks, yeah. So a long time ago, TVs actually, what did they have on top of them? Old TVs, before cable, before antennas, exactly. So Banu was saying an antenna, Rita, Ibrahim. So he's using an antenna and putting shoes on them. So this person has a disability, but has made a choice. And his attitude is that I will not let this disability define me. I want to do something about it. But the really inspiring thing is that he didn't go in and say, well, I really need expensive legs, I need to do expensive surgery. It's just using what he has. So one of the things that we talk about in our course on the power of positive attitude is, can people change? And of course, our answer is that yes, people can change. And what we do is we present a 7-step process on how to change your attitude and your behavior. And I'll just give you an example. It starts out, of course, if you want to change your attitude or your behavior or something, a habit, we know it's not easy to do, but it can be done. And the first step is that you need to make a decision. You need to make a decision, and a true decision is that I'm going to do something about whatever I'm going through, or whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm working, the habit I need to change. The second step is about shifting your focus. Now, shifting your focus is about looking at things differently. So you can look at something as an opportunity or as a tremendous crisis, the end of the world. So let me give you an example. When I was working in my startup Correlation, 2001 in the US and maybe around the world also, what happened is the dot-com bust. And a lot of people who thought that they were quite successful, their companies, the next day, they had to shut down. Now, a lot of people, I mean, it's very difficult when you find yourself unemployed for the first time. People are not used to that. And especially if you're successful and working in a successful company. Now, one friend, a very good friend, he actually lost his job. And for a year, he didn't know what to do. And it was very difficult for him to find something to do. Whereas another friend, what he did is he saw this as an opportunity. And last year, he told me that after he got fired, he started this new company that was sold to Oracle for 400 million. So he says the best thing that happened to him in his life was not that he was fired, but that when he was fired, he looked at it as an opportunity because he always had something in mind that he wanted to do. So of course, in our course, we go through all the different steps that people can take to change their attitude. But in order to change your attitude, you have to want to do it. It all begins with you. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is that how our brain thinks about crises, things that happen to us, like for a child, teaching a child to ride a bicycle. Of course, they're going to fall down. Now, what would you tell a child that has just fallen down and hurt her arm? What would you say? Of course, she's crying, you know, my arm hurts. What would you say to her? Keep on, try again. Yes, that's all, that's good, that's good. Get up, it's a part of life. Second time will be better, be strong, try again. Those are all really good things, but does that make the pain go away? What is the child thinking about at that point of time? They're not thinking about try it again. They're thinking exactly, like Fatima was saying, they're thinking about the pain. Now, is there something that you can do to make the pain go away? So I'll tell you this little story that actually is written by an author, Sean Acker, in his book, The Happiness Advantage. But it's something that very much happened to me, very, very similar point. So I'll borrow his story and pretend that it's mine. So my brother and I, we're a year and a half apart, and I was 7, he was about 5 years and a half. And at that point in time, do you think brothers like each other? Just type in yes or no. No? Rita, okay. Thank you. No. Okay, Mayada saying a big no. Mirna saying a big no. Exactly. So what we did is all the time we used to fight. So I remember this time we were on a bunk bed and we were fighting. Of course, we call it now playing, but we were fighting and we were punching each other. Now, what I did is we were on the top. The bunk bed is 2 beds on top of each other, and we were on the top bed. And what happened is my brother Ihab, he fell down. Of course, I didn't push him, right? I mean, he fell by himself. Not my fault at all. But of course, he fell down and he was going to cry. And then my parents will come in. And who will they blame? Who's at fault? Even though that I swear I didn't do anything. Yes, they'll blame me, exactly. So I was trying to find out very quickly something that I can do to make sure Ihab doesn't cry out. So this was a little bit of cheating because Ihab really loved tigers. He had pictures of tigers everywhere. He had a doll of a tiger and he loved tigers. He would draw them all the time. So before he started crying, I said, Ihab, you are a magical tiger. You fell down on your hands and feet, just like a magical tiger. And Ihab looked at me and he went, oh, you're right. I am a magical tiger. And he came up and we continued playing or fighting. So what happened at that time? Did his pain go away? He fell on his arm and it actually looked like it hurt quite a bit. Did the pain go away? Yes or no? No, 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 exactly. I think most of you said no. The pain didn't go away, but what I did is I distracted him. Now, this is something that's interesting in our brain. Our brain has millions and billions of cells, but still, it cannot concentrate on everything. If it concentrates on two things, it has to split its cells. It concentrates, half the cells go to number one, and then half of the cells go to number two. So when there was the pain, when he was only thinking about the pain, all of his cells were going towards that. When I distracted him with the talk of the tiger, then the pain didn't go away, but he just didn't think about it. So I use this actually just as an example of how you can shift your focus. So if you think of it, reality doesn't change. However, what changes is the type of glasses that we put on. So we can see reality the way that we decide to see it. So do we shape reality or does reality shape us? And that's the difference between successful people and people who just are victims, saying that, look, something that's happening, something difficult has happened. Am I going to do something about it? Can I change the lens that I look at it? Again, I don't want to say that there are not problems and issues that everybody faces. But my strong belief is that the majority of the things that we worry about are not worth worrying about. And what we happen is we paralyze ourselves and we paralyze our brains by constantly thinking about what is wrong and not necessarily what's right. So our CEO, I remember him saying something to us in a meeting. He said that if you come to me with a problem, something that's not going well, I will kick you out of my office. However, if you come to me with a solution, I will do everything in my power to try to fix things. So that's a different outlook on life, how to look at it. All right, so going into the next section, because we're running out of time a little bit. Our typical reactions, how the majority of people react. Now, when someone is faced with a bad situation, typically, what do they tend to do? What's the first thing that they tend to do? So you go, let's say you're driving your car and somebody makes a mistake and they're suddenly going to crash into you. So no crash happens, but so you're angry. What do angry people tend to do? What's the first thing? Yeah, insult, scream, right? Shout, get sad. So this little story from a friend of mine who is, let's see, he grew up, he's not German, but he grew up in Germany. And typically, he told me that people in Germany, they're very organized, but they're very much also about following the rules. So he was driving on Sheikh Zayed Road here in Dubai, and he was driving at the speed limit. And then this person comes from the far left into the far right and cuts him off, and he wants to take an exit. So my friend Palan, he's nearly going to crash. He doesn't crash. So what he does, he has a sports Audi. He puts it into sports mode. He follows the person. He drives in front of them. He stops them. He comes down and he opens the door and he starts shaking the driver and shouting at them in German. Now, he does that and he finds out that the person he's shouting at is a very, very old man, somebody in, his 80s. But he can't stop himself from shouting at that person. But then he goes home and he thinks about what he has done. And what does he feel? What do you think Balad feels after he has thought about it? Ashamed, guilty, shame, regret? Absolutely. So what he did is he acted, first of all. Then he stopped, meaning when he went home, and he thought about what he did, and then he felt guilty. And that is not the way that we should usually live our life. Because what should we do? What should be the right formula? What do you think the right formula should be? Is this the right formula? What should you do first of all? The first thing that you would do. Think, stop, think, stop, think, act. Okay, very good. The typical thing that we do is we act, then we stop, then we think. But this is backwards. What we should do first of all is stop. Why should we stop first of all? Why should we stop and not start by thinking? Because we're angry and we're sad, or we're feeling that somebody did something wrong to us. It's just as what you would do to a little child. You would tell them, you know, just if you're feeling bad, if you want to buy something, if you're crying, stop, count to 10, right? Or what we tell somebody who's really angry is, you know, go have a cup of coffee, change the way what you're doing. Stop, first of all. Then allow your brain to calm down and think. Once you have thought about it, then you can act. So for example, one of the things I say is that all of us have gotten that nasty email. You know, the nasty email that blames you for not sending those documents when you should have sent that document. It's blaming you for being late. And let's assume that you weren't late and it's not your fault. But, you know, somebody sent you a really nasty email and they CC'd your manager. I don't know what the right thing to do. It depends on the situation. But there is one wrong thing to do. What do you think that wrong thing is? Reply. Omar says reply. All right. Everybody says reply. Exactly. You should not reply immediately. Now, your reply could be apologizing, or your reply could be sending a nasty email. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Stop, first of all. Because even if you apologize, it might not have been the right thing. You know, just apologizing for something that's not your fault is not always the right thing to do. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. And reacting strongly also is not the right thing to do sometimes. And sometimes, especially if it's not your fault, is to say, excuse me, I'm sorry, here are the emails that prove that I have actually sent the documents to you in time. All right, so the next thing. The last thing that we will talk about is happiness versus success. And happiness has a lot to do with positive attitude. So a lot of research has been done on what are predictors of success. And typically a lot of people think that successful people are the people who have an intelligence level that's higher than average. And it's true, if you're intelligent, you can be successful. But it's not just about that. The biggest predictor of success is if you have people who have high levels of optimism. What does it mean, high levels of optimism? What do you think? What does optimism mean? So a word that we don't use a lot. Great expectation, positivity, yeah. So looking at the positive side. Now, that doesn't mean that you say something bad happens. You know, I see this a lot with one of my friends. I see, you know, something happened to them and one of their clients is really upset. So he's in a positive mood and I say, what are you going to do about it? And he says, nothing. You know, I'm sure it will solve itself. Is that positivity? Yes or no? No, absolutely. Not doing anything about it is not positivity. Positivity is doing something about it, but being sure that the problem will be solved. So these successful people are people who see crises, difficult things as challenges that they need to overcome and not necessarily obstacles that can't be solved. The second part of it is social support. Now, social support is very important for success, because how do you get things done? You can't get things done by yourself. We live in a community, and typically getting things done needs the support of people, whether they're clients, whether they're colleagues, whether they're suppliers. And people who have a positive attitude are more likely to have more friends or a stronger network, or people who like them and respect them. Now, the formula for success, for happiness, typically what we say, and I remember I used to say this when I came out of college. I came out of university, and the first job that I got paid around 30,000 US dollars a year. And I mean, that was great. But however, to me, that was just the start. And the way that I thought to myself is, if I work harder, I will actually be somebody who is more successful. I'll get promoted. And if I work really, really hard, maybe one day I'll make $1 million. And what happens when you make $1 million, or at least this is what I told myself, is that I will be happy. Now, unfortunately, the more you work, what happens? Does your responsibility go up or down? You have more responsibilities. It goes up and it becomes more stressful, and you never actually become happier. So I remember I heard this from a friend. His mother told him, is never chase money, because money runs really fast. Now, this formula, there's a lot of research that says this formula is backwards. And really, what happens is people who are happier tend to be more successful. Or if people who are happier work harder, and then they are actually more successful. So this is a research from Positive Psychology by Sean Acker. And he quotes a lot of research that was done. And he says that they compared happy brains versus brains that are neutral or at stress. And happy brains are 31% more productive. They actually sell more by 37%. And doctors never go to a doctor who looks like he's upset or mad, because doctors who are happy actually nearly 20% of the time, they make more accurate medical diagnoses. So the happiness advantage is, there's a lot of talk about happiness these days. And of course, there's a certain type of happiness, and it doesn't mean doing nothing, but actually it means being optimistic, being hopeful, knowing that life is full of challenges, and that depending on how you look at it, two people looking at it the same way. One person can have higher productivity, one person can be more resilient. Employees who are happy, there's less burnout, meaning that they get stressed less. There's less turnover, meaning that they leave less. And employees who are leaving companies, it's a high cost because you need to hire people again and retrain them again. And at the end, they give you greater sales. So if you would like to learn more, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar, but we do have courses on the power of positive attitude. So if you or anybody you know would like to learn more about this topic, then please consider signing up for this course, which is on our website. And the first one will be held in Dubai on October the 5th in Arabic, and then in March 2018, also in Arabic, and September 2018 in English. The course is 5 days. It's actually quite fun. It's one of the courses that I enjoy giving the most. And we'll be going into much more detail on how attitudes can be changed. So to summarize, we spoke about attitude being equal to life. How you react to what happens around you defines how you live. We then spoke about the importance of stopping and thinking before you do something. And finally, we spoke about how feeling happy and being more positive can lead to an increase in productivity and creativity. I hope you found the webinar useful, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So please type those into the chat box, and I will try to answer as many questions as possible in the next 5-10 minutes. Fatma saying thank you. It was very helpful. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Amjad, Nazir, and Harish, thank you. Thank you. So if you have any question and you would like to follow up, you can look me up on the website. You can send us more questions and we can follow up with you. But again, thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you in more courses or in future webinars.
Meirc.com